The other big news out on the day, Wayne, Anglo-American
Yes.
out with results. What do you make of all the information flow?
Look, I mean, I must admit, you talk about information flow, I think they released something like 30 individual items on SENS today, so it'll take you about 2 weeks to go through all of them. But some good news, dividends are coming back. I don't think the profit...
But they haven't paid a dividend.
Oh, no. But they say it's coming back. Of course, we're looking at a very bad time period, but I didn't think the fall off in earnings in essence halved, you know, whether you look at operating earnings or earnings per share, whatever the case is, that halved. I didn't think that was as bad as what the market was anticipating. I mean, we all know about it. There was a disaster in De Beers and a disaster in platinum. Now they've both done rights issues. I think De Beers is $1 billion and Amplats is 1.6 billion, but Amplats has already turned because we know what the current platinum price is. So we know Amplats has turned. De Beers, I'm not too sure whether that has turned yet. Copper side was very good, iron ore side was very good. They announced a lot of expansions and there's a lot of good news. They're restructuring the company, a whole lot of things, but the debt level didn't change. You know, they're still at $11 billion debt. So despite, you know, a lot of good things having done, a lot of rationalization
and costs, $1.6 billion in costs coming out of the company.
So you've had all of this and yet the debt levels didn't come down. Obviously we're waiting for a turnaround in the commodity side. The copper side will look a lot better. What worried the market? Because look, the market fell today because of the rise in the US discount rate, and that is, you know, that is very, very important. News that, and it did cause the market to fall, but Anglo seems to have fallen a little bit more certainly than BHP Billiton, and maybe it's the additional write down in the South American copper assets that they bought that worried the market, but it certainly was not a disastrous set of results. It was actually, I thought, was a reasonable set.
What is the market expecting on the restructuring of that debt? Could a rights offering be in the cards, on the cards rather?
I don't think Anglo-American will do a rights offer at this price. I think they're going to wait for their shares to go up a little bit more and then do a rights offer. They want to get that debt down. Amplats was forced to do a rights offer. They had to get more cash. They just had too much debt. And in essence, Anglo-American doesn't mind the Amplats right offer because they're just converting debt for equity. So they're actually getting the Amplats shares, you know, let's call it at near the bottom of the cycle type of basis. But Anglo-American itself, I think they'll wait a while until they do a rights offer.
291 Rand on Anglo-American. There are forecasts out there, and Ashraf Mohammed repeated his forecast on this show this week, saying that he's looking for 450 Rand, possibly by the end of the year. Maybe it's a bit high, but nevertheless, it's still a very cheap share.
I mean, we are heavily overweight Anglo-American, so it certainly, in our view, is cheap, and we're sticking to the diversifieds rather than going into the single commodity shares.
Pioneer Foods is going to be paying that hefty fine to the Competition Commission. What do you make of the company now acquiescing to the 180 million Rand fine after they were going to fight it tooth and nail?
Well, look, I mean, yeah, in South Africa, your best bet is to cooperate with the Competition Commissioner, because they're not going to go somewhere and look at something if there isn't some substance to claims against them. But the market took that into account already. It obviously doesn't stand the company in a very good light. But that having said that, they're not the first one to be fined, and they're not going to be the last ones to get fined either.
Let's diverge for a moment from the markets and introduce David van der Berg, Associate Director of Tax at Ernst & Young. Thank you very much for your time. It was a key week for South Africa with the budget announced on Wednesday. Let's just highlight the tax implications for the South African consumer. There weren't many surprises, but is there anything that you can bring to light that perhaps at this stage the majority has missed?
Bronwyn, thanks for having me. Yes, there were certain things that I think people should be wary of. I think the lack of detail in the budget in itself is a potential danger. The devil's in the detail. I think a lot of anti-avoidance provisions proposed, your protected cell companies, which are now going to be regarded as individual legal entities, to bring them into the CFC loop, your insurance companies looking at artificially increasing their reserves that they claim as deductions, stern warnings regarding compliance, and that it's going to be simplified, but also that it's going to be enforced. And then, of course, the minister showing his true colours as an ex-revenue man and looking at and saying there are some practical problems we've been experiencing. We're going to look at that.
it is his legacy, as you mentioned, South African
Most
Revenue
definitely.
Services, and he's certainly going to implement his expertise as Minister of Finance in South Africa. Wayne, the market didn't react
No.
to the market, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Look, I think it was a lot better than what probably the majority of the market was expecting. Certainly there were quite a few proponents who said that the tax rate's going to go up, that there won't be much, if any, bracket relief for individuals. But revenue looks as though it's going to be a bit higher than expected. The deficit came down a little bit more than was originally budgeted, I think, in October last year. And generally speaking, the budget in good light. And certainly as an individual taxpayer, I'm very happy there wasn't an increase in personal taxes. But of course, you can run a 7.3% deficit this year. You can maybe run it next year. But one of two things must happen. Hopefully the first one happens, and that is the economy recovers and tax receipts go up and the problem's over. But if that doesn't happen, governments have got to balance their books. And unfortunately, and it's not South Africa, it's worldwide, very difficult for governments to cut expenditure. So at the end of the day, it just means tax increases. But we're not there yet.
And the Minister of Finance did allude to the fact that we may have to brace ourselves for tax increases down the line. Is he talking about, in your opinion, as you said, there was a lack of detail in the budget, but do you think that that's probably at the high end, that we're going to see that marginal tax rate going from 40% up to 42, 45%?
Bronwyn, if it's going to be anywhere, it's going to be definitely on the higher of the brackets, most definitely, yes.
Coming back to any potential relief on the South African front, that 6.5 billion rand that did go back to taxpayers, does it compensate for inflation at the end of the day?
Limited to a limited extent, but when it comes to budget time, the Minister of Finance is always like a referee. No matter what decision you make, 50% of the people are going to be upset with you, and I think that is exactly it. He can't go too aggressive, and he also can't go over to the other side. But what should be more concerning for salary earners is the clamp down on structuring opportunities that we may have had and have in future. Company cars, travel allowances that are being clamped down on, key man insurance policies.
So to speak of anymore, are there any?
No,
Exactly, that's exactly the point. And the little bit that there was is now being clamped on, and those were particularly claimed by the higher end earners.
What about the somewhat more creative taxes? We've seen, and it's an absolutely legitimate tax, but the carbon emissions tax that will be introduced from the 1st of September. Do you think the green arena is where we're going to see a number of taxes coming to the fore?
Undoubtedly, I think so. I think people are very concerned about the carbon emission tax, but I think they should also keep in mind that on the other hand, what's being given to taxpayers are your industrial policy allowances, your research and development allowance, certain compliance to being green, incentives being introduced, to balance out the effects.
The tax.
Yes.
You're not going to be buying any new cars round about September, are you, though?
No, I don't think so. No, we'll have to see how it all pans out. I mean, in essence, if you want to control greenhouse emissions, you've got to do it via your pocket. I mean, that's the only way people actually, you can change behavior. You can be as morally persuading as you want to, but when push comes to shove, if you up the price of something, people will use less of it, and that's exactly what's going to happen with carbon emissions. It's going to cost you money to use to emit a vast amount of carbon, and you're going to have to pay in for it. But of course, there are credits. If you cut back, you can actually make some money out of it.